Okay, right, let's unpack this. Mali's gold refinery, Africa's silent declaration of independence, well, it describes it as something much, much bigger. It actually calls this project a silent metallic weapon. Forged, it says, not for war, but for independence. That's pretty powerful framing straight off the bat. Signals really high stakes. So our mission here is to explore why. Why is this refinery seen as such a huge declaration by Mali? A move that, according to this source, could genuinely alter Africa's economic destiny. It's apparently sending a clear message to places like the IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund, involved in global economic policy, and to what the source calls the old powers that still believe Africa should mine the gold but never touch it.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here really is the context you need to grasp. Mali is currently the fourth largest gold producer in Africa. That's significant, and gold makes up over 75% of its total exports. It's huge for their economy. Yet for decades, and this is the crucial bit, the actual refining of that raw gold, turning it into the high-value pure stuff, bullion. That step was almost always done overseas. Primarily, we're talking Switzerland, maybe South Africa, or, private refineries in Europe.
So they dig it up but send it away to get the real value added.
Precisely. And the consequence for Mali. Consistently small profits from their own major resource, very limited control, and of course a deep dependency on foreign pricing. Someone else sets the price. Our source uses this really quite stark analogy. It says Mali produces the gold, but someone else decides what it's worth. It's described as like baking the cake, but letting someone else eat it, and then they toss you the crumbs.
Wow.
Yeah.
That really paints a picture. So essentially, they're missing out on the most profitable part of the whole process.
Exactly. It powerfully highlights this whole concept of value chain capture, you see. By refining it themselves, Mali is aiming to shift, to go from just being a supplier of the raw materials, subject to whatever price they're given, to becoming a producer who adds the value themselves. That means potentially greater control over the final price, direct access to markets, basically cutting out those intermediaries who historically, well, they took a big slice of the profits.
Right, right. And this new facility, the one they're building now, launched under Assimi Goïta's government. This isn't just some small pilot project, is it? The source says it's state-of-the-art, designed to process, get this, 200 tons of gold annually. I mean, what does processing 200 tons a year actually mean for a country like Mali? How does that really shift their position globally?
Oh, it's a massive shift, a truly significant one. To put 200 tons in perspective, that figure likely represents a very substantial chunk of Mali's entire annual gold output right now. So you're talking about a huge volume of gold that suddenly doesn't need to leave the country, doesn't need to pass through foreign hands for that key value step. And refining, remember, it isn't just basic processing. It's transforming that raw, often impure gold into 99.99% pure bullion. That's the global standard.
The standard for trading, for reserve.
Exactly. This transformation adds immense value. It makes the gold easily tradable, verifiable, storable as a liquid asset. So it's about more than just getting bigger profits, though that's part of it. This project is really designed to give Mali greater economic sovereignty, control. The aspiration, and the source really highlights this, is that this gold, it could be stored in African vaults, priced in African markets, and crucially, it could directly fund African development. We're talking schools, roads, hospitals, futures, right there on the continent, funded by their own resources.
Okay, so that's the vision for Mali. But what about the wider picture? Our source suggests this isn't just happening in isolation in Mali. It's portrayed as part of maybe a bigger pattern across Africa. Mentions examples like Niger under Ibrahim Traoré reclaiming uranium resources, Burkina Faso nationalizing land. How does the source connect Mali's refinery to these other moves? Is it suggesting a sort of continental shift?
Yes, absolutely. The analysis presents this as a clear signal. African nations, perhaps slowly, but it argues very boldly, taking back control of their natural resources. It frames it as a profound reevaluation of those historical economic relationships, where raw materials flowed out of Africa to fuel industries and economies elsewhere, often with, let's face it, limited direct benefit coming back.
Right, the baking the cake analogy again.
Exactly. And the source argues that the global economic establishment, they're definitely watching this, because every ounce of gold Mali processes and potentially keeps, that's one less ounce feeding into those global financial systems. Systems that historically have often been built at least partly on resource extraction from places like Africa. And as the article really emphasizes, gold isn't just, shiny metal. It's foundational. It's the backbone of global reserves, banking power, currency security. It offers real leverage.
And the source really digs into that history, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes a powerful case that for centuries, African gold has sort of quietly fueled the wealth of empires, colonial ones, corporate ones. It mentions practices during colonization, where gold was often one of the very first things extracted, the British, the French, the Portuguese. The source details how huge quantities, potentially it suggests, trillions of dollars worth just from West Africa alone, left the soil, with very little tangible benefit left behind for the people living there.
Yes, and this brings up a really poignant point the analysis raises, the historical irony. Mali was once the heart of the great Malian Empire. Home to Mansa Musa, famously, perhaps the richest person who ever lived, largely due to gold. And yet today, the source points out, his descendants, the people of Mali, often live in poverty, even while international companies are mining gold, sometimes just miles away from villages lacking basic things like clean water or electricity.
That contrast is stark.
It is. And so the source presents this refinery as maybe the first real step towards changing that whole equation, towards making Mali a genuine player, not just, well, a pawn in the global economy.
Okay, so it's an ambitious vision, clearly. But it does make you wonder, why might a project like this be viewed with, say, nervousness, or even described as a threat by some in Western media or financial circles? Beyond just the symbolism, what are the practical hurdles, the potential international pushback that a project this big might face, even if the source focuses on the positives?
That's a really crucial question, because while the source definitely champions this move, there are always practical challenges. Things like the huge capital investment needed up front. Getting and keeping the technical expertise required to run a state-of-the-art refinery isn't simple. And then there's navigating the, let's be honest, complex international trade dynamics. Established global markets for refined gold, they're highly competitive, deeply interconnected.
So breaking into that isn't easy.
Not at all. Securing direct market access, building trust as a new major producer, that's a significant undertaking. Though the analysis does suggest that, well, if one country manages to make this kind of shift successfully, others might be emboldened to follow suit. Creates a precedent, perhaps. And the source really concludes on this note, that this refinery isn't just for Mali's gold. It truly symbolizes something bigger, a broader awakening across Africa, is how it's put. It views Mali's success here, if it happens, not just as Mali's win, but as a potential step forward for nations like Ghana, Congo, South Sudan, Zimbabwe. Basically, for any nation still dealing with what the source explicitly calls the lingering effects of economic colonization.
Right, so let's try and sum up what we've sort of unpacked today. This gold refinery being built in Bamako, Mali, it's not just concrete and steel. It's being presented very forcefully by our source as this powerful symbol of economic self-determination, a really significant step, potentially, in Africa's long pursuit of controlling its own wealth, its own destiny. And it reiterates that impactful closing line from the source material. Africa isn't poor, it's been robbed. But the guards are waking up. And this refinery, that's just the beginning. So it leaves us with something to think about, a final thought for you listeners to consider. If Mali's gold refinery really does become a kind of blueprint, if other resource-rich nations follow this path, what could the economic landscape of Africa, and maybe even the wider world, actually look like, say, a decade from now? What changes might we see?